So good afternoon, everyone. Today is Thursday, May 23rd, 2019. We're commencing our budget review. Today, we have our fiscal year 2020 with our auditor. Joining us, of course, is our clerk and deputy clerk. That would be Jim Brannon, and of course, Jennifer. Jennifer Locke. Goodness gracious. Too many meetings today, sorry about that. Anyways, so attending our commissioners Duncan, Brooks, and Filios. Any changes to the agenda? Hearing none. And I forgot to introduce Dina Darrow, our finance director, who's been heading this up for us. So without further delay, fiscal 2020 budget review with our auditor. Would you kick us off, Dina?
Actually, I'd just like to say good to see everyone.
Okay.
I will be turning it over to Dina right now for the preliminary summary, but I want to thank you thus far for the work you were doing. I know you're faced with many tough decisions, and I hope to bring you a few more today. So, with that, Dina Darrow, our finance director.
Okay.
Thank you, Clerk Brannon. Thanks, commissioners. We're back at it. Today we're presenting the clerk's division's priorities. As of right now, and this is, work in progress, your deficit right now is just at 9 million. This reflects the work that you've done so far. So good job. So just wanted to give you that snapshot. That's also in your binder. So your binder's been updated to reflect all the changes up to this point. So you can feel free to look at that anytime at your leisure, and as these numbers move, of course, we will be updating these sheets in your binders so you have them handy. So that said, we'll go into our presentation. So first, I just want to give a shout out to Michelle. I just got back this morning at 1 a.m. from a conference with the Government Finance Officers Association in Los Angeles. So Michelle has been working with our division managers to put together this information. So today, we're going to skip to the punchline. The clerk's division has 5 departments. Auditor, my personal favorite, district court, county assistants, recorder, and elections. So this year, our big asks are going to be for the 2 big mandated departments, district court and elections. We will also have interactive 3D presentations. Our friends from ES&S have brought in voting machines to demonstrate what we're looking at to upgrade our systems. So the first part of our presentation, I'm going to let Michelle take the lead. She put together this information, and she, with Marissa, were at the forefront of the Odyssey implementation. Michelle is our resident expert on Odyssey and on the courts. So she has some very rich information to share with you today. So I will hand it off to Michelle.
Okay, thank you, Dina. I'm sure you guys have all seen this at this point in time, but this is really kind of give you an idea of the trend of how Kootenai County is growing. There's comparing it to the other like-sized counties as well, and you can see that Kootenai County is definitely trending upwards over the last several years. So as far as district court stands and the impact that growth has had on the courts, I pulled this information off of the Idaho State Uniform Crime Reporting. And on the left-hand slide, the top 5 offenses from 2015 to 2017 as it relates to Kootenai County. And the Group A offenses are the ones that are like drug enforcement violations, drug narcotics, that type of thing. But you can see where we're trending as far as the type of offenses that you're seeing in Kootenai County. This one also shows you how the Kootenai County compares to the other like-sized counties we're also ahead of the game here as far as the number of all offenses that you're seeing in Kootenai, as it compares to everything in District 1. Kootenai County total offenses and arrests, the 5-year trend, you can see that the total offenses is also trending upwards. There's been some spikes, like 2013 is a little more, but we're trending back up. Now, as far as the data is concerned on this, nothing is showing for 2018 yet because they haven't compiled those statistics.
And our guess is those will be higher.
So, as you know, District 1 is comprised of 5 other counties, Kootenai obviously being the largest of those. But you can see on the top there, the top graph shows you how Kootenai falls, or how District 1 falls in with the rest of the state. District 3 is Ada, which you would expect them to be much larger, but the second largest is Kootenai, or District 1. So we really are seeing a high increase in crime. Kootenai County crime rate per 1,000 population from 2016 to 2017, we did see a slight change of 6.3%. The top 5 crimes, though, were extortion, fraud, drug, narcotic, counterfeiting, and assault.
Extortion.
Yeah,
We're getting classy here.
I know. What was kind of interesting about that statistic, though, if you go out and actually look at the number, it's kind of like it went from 2 to 5.
Oh.
So I'm not talking great quantities, but it pushed it to the top of the list. Now, I wanted to give you an idea of what because you've already heard from Carlene, and Carlene's, what she provides is different than what the county clerk provides on district court services. So the county clerk has to provide, or their service starts at the time of the case filing. And there's a little graphic down below that shows how it goes through the court. And throughout that whole court process, Marissa and her team are supporting the court. As far as what Carlene provides, she's more on the state side, where she's dealing like with the judges, the bailiffs, specialty court, that type of thing. So there's those, they call it the guns and robes portion of it, so that's kind of what she has. But Marissa and her team really have to provide all of the administrative support that goes with each one of those case filings. So as you see that trend upwards as far as offenses, you're going to see more and more burden on the court. So there's a few key statutes that I wanted to point out or bring to your attention, and I'm sure you're probably already aware of them. The first one is Idaho Code 1-1613, which indicates that the county shall provide for staff, personnel, supplies, and other expenses of the district court. And in 1976, a district court fund was created in each county for the purpose of helping to support trial court operations. It is supported by filing fees and court costs. And then Idaho Code 19-5305, it's the collection of judgments. And the reason we want to point this out is we feel it would support the effort that we want to make towards improving our collections efforts. So this is kind of a last minute slide. I apologize for the look. But we just wanted to point out or show you how Kootenai County is comparing with other like-sized counties, and kind of give you an idea of where Ada sits as well, because we know they're way off the charts as far as the rest of us. But as you can see right there, as far as the total judges, Kootenai is sitting at 13, and I think there's a request for a couple more that are coming forward.
Yes.
Canyon is got 29, whereas we are at 13. Now, Canyon's slightly, as far as population, they're just a little bit larger than us, but you can see they've got a lot more judges in comparison. As well as the staff, they're supporting, we've only got 13 to support the entire population. And then, I don't know, Marissa, you might want to talk a little bit more towards the caseload and stuff and what you're seeing down there.
Well, as you can see, the Kootenai County's total caseload is getting pretty close to Canyon County's, and our infraction levels essentially the same. But our staffing levels, courtroom availability, and available judges are much more limited than Canyon County. So that's why we're definitely understaffed.
So, and based on that information that we just presented, we wanted to give you an idea of, as far as all the justice positions, where the district court is falling. And you can see on the top line there, the dashed line at the top, that's giving you a linear outlet or look at how the district court falls in there. And there's one year that we had a spike, which we're assuming at this point that it was probably temps that caused that spike. But on the red line where you can see it's trending upward, that is looking at both, or looking at the prosecutor and the PD, and you can see each one is climbing upwards, whereas the district court has remained pretty much level throughout the years. And that's a 10-year look back. So as far as the current court collections process, district court has over $35 million in uncollected fines, fees, and restitution, with several cases dating back as far as 1984. Up until this point, there's been no real concerted effort to collect fines and fees. Departments like adult misdemeanor are losing out on funds because of this. They have over $1 million in uncollected supervised probation fees. Uncollected fines and fees are typically turned over to a collection agency. The drawback with that is it really reduces the defendant's ability to pay, because it tacks on a 25% service fee to them. And the agency that we're using, as of March 31st of 2019, there was 28.9 million in outstanding open cases. And then only 5.4 million has been collected since the inception of the contract with them, and they have retained over 1 million in commissions. That money could have all come back to the county if we were not using that service.
How old is that service, Michelle?
You know, I couldn't find an actual date, but I think it goes back at least 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
But the contract didn't indicate. You know, it was just a period-to-period contract type thing, and so I don't know when they first signed it.
If I may, who's that contract with?
Alliance One.
Okay.
The agency that we're contracting with as well also provides a payment plan option, but that it incurs significant setup fee for the defendant. This current process really is unfairly penalizing the lower class citizen or lower income citizens, so it makes it really hard for them, and it dehumanizes and negatively impacts them and reduces their ability to get out of debt. Nationally, the trend is to move away from penalizing defendants for non-payment of court-ordered legal financial obligations. This is trying to give you an overview or a snapshot of what the current state of collections are. As I mentioned, there's cases that go back to 1984 that have not been collected at this point. Now, there's 2 cases, I think, so it's really minimal, but it, you know, still, it's just the point of the matter is that it's gone ignored over the last over the last 10 years. And you can see on this as well that there's a trend upwards as far as years that are really bad. You know, 2014, 15, 16, in that time frame, there is a huge increase in uncollected fines and fees.
And what is the downside to a person who owes if they don't pay?
They get turned over to collections.
I mean, and then what
Destroys their
happens?
credit. They can never pay
Right,
it off.
it's already destroyed.
Yeah,
but-
but they
but they
just
don't-
have that over their head forever.
Yeah, yeah.
It's so sad.
Thank you.
Marissa and I had the opportunity to attend a really informative seminar that related to court collections and what other counties, states are doing to improve their collections. And I wanted to throw this slide in here because I think it gives you an idea of where the courts as a whole are moving. And this is information from the National Task Force on Fines, Fees, and Bail Practices. Believe it or not, there is a task force for that. But it's supported by multiple court agencies. And what they're trying to do is get people to comply, basically, and what they are recommending judges to do. One of them is the reduction of the amount due. the extension of time to pay, a reasonable payment plan or a modification of the existing payment plan, or credit those fines and fees with community service. And then you credit for completion of a relevant court-approved program such as education, job skills, and that type of thing, or a complete waiver or suspension of the amount due. You do something like that, then the state and the county end up losing out, So who pays for justice and why the compliance process is critical? It starts with the judgment, works its all the way through, the fines and fees are imposed, and then community service and compliance department would kick in at that point to make sure that the defendant is compliant with the order. But right now, what the court would like to propose to the board is creating a department that will look both at collections and ensuring compliance. Right now, what's happening with the current agency, there's approximately 846 cases that are in collections. And as I mentioned earlier, the total open accounts amounts to 28.9 million with a low rate of return. There's exorbitant fees that are added, but in addition to that, the county only receives 20% of each payment that's made by the defendant. So instead of receiving 100% of the payment, we're only getting a portion. So it just increases the time of payment. It really penalizes low-income defendants, and they're pushed further into debt, reducing their ability to pay. And time is the enemy. So the longer a case is unpaid, the harder it is to collect. What Marissa and her team are proposing is focusing on the current cases. We're not really going to go after anything that's older than 5 years because it's going to become more difficult to contact the defendants. But in the in-house collections, it'll provide an opportunity to develop a rapport with the defendants because we'll be now face-to-face with them. Move from, at that point, you can move to get them on a payment plan so you can start a regular schedule as opposed to keeping them in collections. And then by doing this and moving it in-house, we would minimize the penalties as well that they're currently having to pay through the collection agency. And it brings more of a human touch back to it. One of the things that we got from that conference was that other states have implemented something similar and they have seen an overall increase in compliance.
Okay.
And so what we would propose as well is leaving the older cases with the collection agency and let them continue to go after them. But I think the older the cases they get, it's harder to collect on those. The other proposal that we're putting forward is one for payment plans. Currently with the agency, there's 361 defendants enrolled, but the total case value is only $297,000. They have to pay a $15 setup fee and then a monthly fee as well that can range up to $8.25. And if they're late at all, it can go as high as $11.25. The payment plans only are set up on cases over $200. And that was just a decision that was made by the prior court management. So that's one of the things we would look at changing, is making it easier for them to pay on lower court costs. They have no incentive to enroll. When they get done and they come down and talk to the community service or compliance team, they're given a form and then they have to pay a setup fee and then go on and contact the agency. So you lose them. The minute they walk out the door, you've lost them. The payment plan option that is being proposed is to set up enrollment kiosks to enroll as they leave court. Because what better time to get them is when they're walking out of court. And it would be a one-time enrollment fee of $12.50, which has already been presented to the board and approved to add that fee. And then right now, Marissa's been really working with the Supreme Court to find other options to maybe add a penalty for noncompliance, but also to incentivize them for re-enrollment. If they do fall off, we can provide some type of incentive to get them back on. The in-house collections also provides the opportunity for her clerks to develop a rapport with the defendants. And one of the systems that they are looking at adding is a system that will allow them to send regular text reminders that your payment's due. And again, this is one of those things that it has been successfully rolled out in other states. They've had some more complex systems, but we're trying to keep it as simple as possible. Unfortunately, Odyssey allows us to do this because it's a module that's within the new court management system.
Yes. So we can leverage current technology to support this. So after the presentation, we'll show you the actual numbers like we did with the other departments, and we'll show you the costs associated with setting up this program. And with that, I will hand it off to Judd for elections. Introducing Judd Wilson, our elections director.
All right, folks. So, as you all know, I started off government worker. I started off in journalism, and before that, doing policy analysis. So this whole election step is actually very interesting, and of course, it's what got you to where you are. So let me just give you a bird's eye view, which you're probably very familiar with, but let me just hit on that before we get to this. Okay, so the elections department is really oriented on the future, on the 2020 election cycle, but beyond that, 2022, 2024. Now, what are our goals? What is it that we're looking for? What are our quantitative measurements? Well, we want the vote to be right. We want to make sure we get it right. That everybody who casts a ballot has his or her vote counted, right? We also want to make sure that those ballots are secure to prevent fraud. Of course, we want to ensure that we're in compliance with state and federal laws. We want to mitigate late reporting, and I'll get to that in a second here, but this county has not had the best history in terms of getting results in, which Mike Patrick knows very well. And then, of course, to make sure that we do all these things, we need people who are adequately trained, supplied, and supported, and who want to stick around. So employee morale and retention is very important. So, as you're all familiar with, people care about politics here and across the country. What you see in front of you is a trend. So here we've got two primary cycles. We've got 2016 and 2018. See, Kootenai is here in the purple. Those are our sheer numbers of voters in ballots cast. But then in the gold line, you see the actual voter turnout percentage, okay? With 100% being up here. So in a primary, those numbers are not going to be as big as in November. But what I want you to notice is that even in these two primaries, even if this is all you're looking at, we've got an upward trend. Those are May elections. Okay. Then we get to the November elections, and again, we've got an upward trend. Now, we're comparing ourselves to Canyon in the royal blue here in Bonneville in the light blue. Now, everybody's going up. This is not just us. We're not the only ones doing it. But what I want you to notice is that the gold line is higher than the other ones. We have a smaller population, but a more intensely political, dedicated population. Not saying nothing bad about theirs, but we just care a little bit more, it seems. And that's true with all of these. Look at that. Okay? Now, so what I don't have here is 2020. 2022 and 2024. Now, of course, I like to say, so when we were here, and actually in March of this year, people hadn't quite had enough time to figure out if they loved Donald J. Trump or hated Donald J. Trump. But next November, they will have had, since the summer of 2015, they will have had, what, 5 years? So the reason why this number is so big, and this is a midterm. It's not supposed to be like that. It's supposed to be maybe here. The reason is because they are very, very committed to either loving him or hating him, keeping him or getting him out. So in 2020, we're going to be up here. And then in 2022, if he's still there, we're going to be up here. And then in 2024, all bets are off because now we've got an open seat. So we are really looking forward to massive turnout. And that would be massive even if our population was static, not growing up. That's not happening, right? You're hearing that from every department. We've got a booming population. So we've got a boom in sheer numbers, and we have a boom in intensity, commitment to political activities. So we've got a problem. And so unfortunately, I have to ask you to consider how to mitigate that problem, which is going to entail spending money. I hate spending money. I don't like coming here before you saying, please spend money. But we could keep doing what we're doing. We could get by, but I'm telling you, it would be a pretty bad scenario. And already, if you look at the reporting times, we've got a bad situation. All right, so being a reporter and being somebody who's tracked politics for a long time, reporting times of 1:15 and 4:30 in the morning, almost 5 in the morning, I mean, that's Philadelphia stuff. That's Chicago stuff. That should not be Kootenai County stuff. Okay. I can pretty confidently state that we're very towards the bottom of Idaho County's reporting results. Now, even if you do nothing different in terms of funding and equipment, we are going to do everything we can to mitigate that by recruiting the best poll workers, the best judges, and retaining our excellent staff. We're changing procedures so that we are going to speed things up, get things more efficient without sacrificing accuracy and conformity to the law. But that's just going to get us by. We're still going to have a very, very late reporting time if we do nothing different. So, facing all of those things, we're going to look at our 850s. Now, our DS 850s are a central count, high-speed optical scanner. They can process up to 300 ballots per minute. They do it accurately. They provide a paper trail so we can see everything that's happened on that machine. And you've seen this with our LNA tests. So what they do is, a couple of the added benefits that they can do is they can sort out write-ins, which during our bigger elections are a bit of a hassle, right? But they can mitigate that. And also, they can help with recounts. Okay, we will have a recount probably in the next week or two because we've got thankfully, a very small race, but that isn't a tie situation. So our 850s can really expedite those things. But then I want you to think about those big pictures, about I'm anticipating a 90% turnout in 2020. 90%. We were at 87% in 60. Mm-hmm. We were at 73% last November. That's nuts. That would be like a low percentage. So the 850s are great at what they do. However, we've got two of them, but we're already getting these very late reporting times, even with those two devices, even with the great poll workers, great staff that we have. So one of the things I'm asking is for another 850, because the sheer numbers are too big for what we have. Okay? And in order to make sure that this is secure, I'm asking for a small amount to remodel part of the elections department so we can enclose those 3 machines, make sure that they're transparent, make sure that we've got locks, all those good things we already have, which can't fit in the space where our 2 machines already have. So this will further our goals of accuracy, ballot security, mitigating late reporting, and employee morale and retention. Because when you're standing there at 4:30 in the morning trying to count ballots, you're not feeling that great about your body or your life or your job. Okay.
So maybe your life.
Well, and keep in mind, everybody in the state is saying, when are they going to report? Okay. So we want to avoid that. So in addition to the 850, one of the things that can mitigate that problem is this thing called the express vote. So the express vote is a different thing. It's this little bad boy right here. Okay. And Lori from ES&S will get up and explain the differences between these 2 devices in just a second. But one of the things I love about this is that we can put this in every polling place. Okay. This is a touchscreen device that is very familiar with everybody across the age spectrum. Okay. And you, as she'll show you, you review what you've done, and you still have a piece of paper you can check. Okay. So we got ballot security, we got accuracy. But this is fast. This is fast, and people like it. Down in Cassia County, they adopted these years ago, and they have some precincts. I was talking to the election director, where people can choose between your traditional pre-printed ballot or these. Everybody uses these, and they say, if there's a place where they don't have it, they say there isn't. Okay. So what we want to do is we want to put these in every polling place. Not a ton all at once, but we want one for every polling place, every precinct. We also want to use them for early voting. You might have seen pictures in the paper. You might have experienced the fact of standing an hour in line to do early voting, okay, especially during these big elections. We have some of these in there that will really cut that down. So again, and this results in improved confidence in people's perceptions of how the county runs elections, which is good. It's good for the county, but it's also good for their faith in the process. Okay. So the other thing I wanted to point out is, and Lori will speak to this, is that this is ADA compliant. This is ADA compliant, but that's all it does. I can't use this in early voting for cutting down those lines. I can't use this in all the polling places to cut down those lines. But this I can. Okay? So
I'm sorry, why can't you?
it simply doesn't do it. It's slow, it's clunky, and it just simply doesn't do all the things that this one does.
Okay.
So with that, I'll turn it over to Lori.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Brandon, commissioners.
Please state your name for the record, please.
Lori Momartz, I'm with Election Systems and Software.
Thank you.
I'm Idaho's representative. So, a little background with the Automark, which is this big unit up here. So we developed this going back to 2006. And at the time, you know, the technology, that this was really kind of state of the art back in 2006. And so, you know, for the disabled voters that they used it, they liked it. Over time, most recently, it just became too bulky, slow, just not very user-friendly for them. So a lot of the times they're out there because it's federally mandated to be in the precincts, but they're just not used. Think about your cell phone back in 2006. You know, I think mine was as big as my head back at that, you know, that year. So we developed the Express Vote, and we call it a universal voting device. So this weighs about 20 pounds, and it fits in a soft shell carrying case. The Automark, when it's in its carrying case, it weighs about 80 pounds. So it really takes, you know, 2 poll workers to you know, bend their legs. It's heavy to lift it up. So this, we're finding that poll workers, it's lighter for them, easier for them to set up. And as Judd had mentioned, for the different benefits, that this is can be used for all voters. The Automark, it uses an ink cartridge, and so you'd have to, every election, go and make sure that the ink, that there's enough ink in there, and do little tricks, sometimes add water to it to make sure the ink, you know, after it's sitting for a year or 2, ink dries up. So another difference with the Express Vote is it's thermal printer. So there's no consumables, so you just have the activation cards. It's a heavy-duty thermal paper, and the cost savings with this for in-person early voting is you don't need to pre-print any traditional ballots, so you're not wasting all those the ballots, managing the ballots, and having to guess how many to pre-print. So these are 10 cents a sheet compared to ballots being 32 cents on up, or depending how much you're spending on ballots. This can also be used as a ballot duplicator. So absentee ballots that are coming in, that might, the 850, it might not read, they can use this to duplicate that ballot onto the activation card, and then put it into the 850. And then also, as Judd had mentioned, at the polling locations, it can be used as a ballot on demand printer as well. So if the poll workers are noticing that ballots are running low, they can call into the office and say, I need, you know, some more ballots, but while the ballots are being delivered, they can direct voters over to the Express Vote to use in the meantime. And it has, you know, an internal battery. It runs about 4 hours depending on usage. So it's pretty much an all-in-one. It's an internal printer as well. So you just plug in the battery, open up the side, turn it on, and enter the password, and you're good to go. So I'll just show you so this is a pre-marked card, summary card. And what it does is, did you want them to come up and?
If you would like, you're welcome to just give this a go. We can show you the difference between these two, but why don't you go ahead and explain just kind of how this works.
So it's the same check-in procedure, and then what many jurisdictions are doing is they're offering to their voter, would you like to try our new technology or vote on a traditional ballot? Cascia and several other counties here in Idaho, Fremont County, for example, Abby, the clerk there, her first election had 50.1% of her voters use the Express Vote. So she was really surprised with that turnout. So there's a corner cut because it's thermal paper, because it needs to be inserted into the Express Vote because it's a thermal printer, a certain direction. And I know you probably can't see. So I just inserted that activation card.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's pulling up the ballot style for that voter. So it's a touchscreen interface. Can you see, or is there?
Yeah, no, we're
okay.
fine. Go ahead.
So then the voter would just navigate through, and there's a next button. And it has all the same features and functionalities as the Express Vote. So down below, there's the headset, so you can use that headset here, and a little port for a sip and puff paddle. And then it is showing that it's the battery that's plugged in, and then the battery it's running. It has black on white, white on black contrast, as well as zoom. So when a voter goes in, favorite US beach, vote for one, so I'm gonna vote for Daytona Beach. Well, actually, that was Nantucket Beach. It's hard, vote, you're using this upside down at an angle. And this one is saying vote no more than 2. Favorite way to spend time, I'm going to say watching TV and cooking, which I do not like to cook, but, so the proposition, are you in favor of Election Day being a national holiday? Yes or no? I'll say, oops. And so, as you know, so I meant to hit no, but I hit yes instead, so then you can kind of just toggle back and forth.
Back and forth.
Mhm. And then, are you in favor of Saturday voting? Not me, but maybe you are. So now it'll bring to the summary screen. And here, and if I want to make a change, I just go back to that contest or the proposition, and then I can deselect and make a change. So I'm going to go ahead and hit next. And this is just another verification to make sure I'm ready to print my card. So now it's printing all the contests and how I made my selections. And it's returned to the voter with the contest and how I marked my ballot. And then the voter would put it into the ballot box, and then it would come back here and be fed through or scanned through the 850.
So what I love about that is that, I mean, there's a bunch of things I really like about this. The first is that this does happen where you're out in the polling place and they're saying, wow, we had more people turn out than we thought. We're kind of losing this balance. It's okay. Okay, this will help. But what I really like about it is the cost savings. I'm going to have Michelle speak to this in a moment because she's the accountant and I'm not. but even off the bat, even just the difference in the actual cost of the paper itself, all by itself, there's a savings over what we're currently paying. And you extrapolate that over years, multiple elections per year. Now this isn't a free thing to say to them, wow, where's this been all my life? But again, dealing with the problems we're dealing with, accuracy, ballot security, employee morale and retention, reporting times, all those kinds of things. This could really help out over the long haul, not just in 2020, but for the next many, many cycles. Okay, so I'm going to turn this over to Michelle. Talk some numbers.
So in this, you're going to probably have to look at your handout that we provided in order to see this. But what I did for the elections department and Jed was go through and take a look at what the new system would provide as far as potential savings, and then holding it steady as if we were to never make a change at all. So it's kind of a comparison between the two. And in order to do that, I had to make some assumptions, and those assumptions is that with the express vote paper, if you were to roll this out, we're assuming a tiered reduction in printed paper as the voter confidence increases. So Judd and I kind of talked about this, and he was thinking it would be like start out at 75% pre-printed, 25% thermal, or that type of situation, and a trend down over the years to where we're doing everything under, or almost everything under the express vote. Assuming there was a faster transition, obviously the savings would be realized sooner. And the amounts that I pulled in, just to make sure that everyone's clear though, those are historical costs. So, you know, there could be some fluctuation in that, obviously, depending on what other costs are attached and increases. And I was assuming about 3 elections per year, and added a potential 3% increase in fees due to inflation. There are other costs, indirect costs, that were not factored into this just because I wasn't aware what else was out there. There could be other costs for employee or labor or that type of thing, but soft costs that you just don't think about. But in looking at this, if the first section up there was looking at just going with the express vote system and tiering it over, 5 years or whatever, the biggest, or the bulk of the cost is obviously going to be the first year that you purchase the system. And as you trend along, you're going to see a reduction in the actual pre-printed cost, and that's what's going to drive it down, is as you phase those out. Now, I know they mentioned about 35 cents for the pre-printed ballots, but looking back at our historical information as far as what that has cost over the years, it's trending more towards 95 cents a ballot. Not to account for the fact that if you don't use them all, you gotta toss it, right? So the bottom part of that down there is just looking at, let's say you made no change whatsoever, and assume the same thing across the board. Now, I know it looks kind of funny when you look at the cost savings, it doesn't look like there's really any savings, but based on those assumptions, depending on what the county decided to do over time, you would probably realize a greater cost savings as you work through it. And it's not necessarily just, you know, dollars like Judd had mentioned, it's also other costs that are, you know, soft costs, voter confidence, that type of thing that come back to pay the county.
So essentially, what you're saying is that over a 5-year period, the cost, the projected cost savings is just over $167,000.
Yeah. Well, it's actually, you're still, at that point, you're still paying it off.
You're still paying it off, right?
Yeah.
And you're phasing in more machines over time, correct?
No, it's staying level with the same number of machines. I
Okay.
didn't, because, I think Judd's original proposal was for 70, right?
Yeah, we want to phase this in. I mean, the savings in terms of not having to ask the printers out in Longview to print all these ballots, many of which go straight in the trash, to have them shipped over to go into the trash. We could order the paper, order the thermal paper, and that's done. It's done. I mean, extrapolate that over elections per year and then each year, it's definitely very interesting.
But when you're ordering the thermal paper, you would be using the same mechanism, and let me change that, same thought process as if you were ordering pre-printed ballots.
So we order the ballot stock from the company, and then they ship it to the printer, and then the printer prints it. So we have a couple different costs. The cost of paper, and then the cost of printing, shipping for both items. We could over time, if we completely transitioned, there wouldn't be a printer. That would be the printer.
And how many machines would it take to completely transition?
It would be, well, you'd be talking multiple machines per polling place, certainly.
I mean, multiple meaning
Multiple meaning probably 3 or up. I mean, think about the lines you see.
Per
Think about
polling
per
place,
polling place, yes.
which would
Per precinct, I want to be specific.
which would extrapolate into what?
So
About
we've
200.
got 70 precincts,
About
so if you put 3 per, you got
Okay,
210.
well.
So this would be to getting us to 1/3 of that.
So, but if we went ahead and did the whole thing, not right now, but it would also, the savings would be commensurate with that, wouldn't it?
Yes,
Yeah, you'd be, Michelle could tell you.
Yeah, and Dina could probably chime in as well, but yes, you would see a greater return because you're getting rid of that paper.
You don't have the waste.
Right, okay, I can see that.
And you have confidence in the populace because, you know, it's easy, it's clear, you don't have, I mean, we have a lot of volunteers that are remarking ballots because somebody marked them wrong. So there's just so many underlying soft costs and process improvements that are possible with this approach.
And I'd like to point out, we anticipate we're gonna get about 350,000 in reimbursement from the state for running the
For the
election.
2020. So
2020,
we
that's our
draw that
estimate.
with some revenue
Okay.
each election year, and obviously it'll be more
Is that 'cause
fiscal
it's
year 20 because the
presidential?
presidential, we'll have the presidential March primary, the regular May primary, and then the November general election.
So that
So it's just over 350.
Yeah, that offsets a lot of the cost.
So when you talk about, let's go back to the 167,000 savings. Okay, so what, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, what we're saying here is that, I'm gonna put it another way, that it's actually only costing, I shouldn't say only, but costing us 167,000 when you compare the new implementation versus status quo.
And we'll look at those numbers in greater detail when we look at
Okay.
the elections numbers section. But yes, over time, there will be a cost savings and ongoing greater process improvement as well.
Okay. So now, when we say an average of 3 per polling place, my guess is, in some polling places, you might want to implement 6 or 7, and in
Yes.
others, you might, yeah, okay.
Exactly.
It's gonna vary, okay.
Yeah, we had, you know, it depends on turnout, depends on the number of registered voters per precinct.
You know what's gonna be interesting, though, if you were to implement this? figure most of our transplants of late, maybe more than of late, have been over the age of 60. I could just see this. This is going to be fascinating.
But
Yeah.
you said that older people tend to be able to use this with some facility.
Well, absolutely, because in the first place, this is fast, and you can see it, and you can adjust the size. But in the second place, people of every
I mean, it
age that I
seems
know
logical.
Yeah.
uses smartphones, tablets, iPads.
ATMs.
Absolutely. We're used to this, kind of regardless of age now. So I think it would work out pretty well in terms of adoption
Mhm.
across the age spectrum. And because you still get to review it and you hold it in your hands, see, now you know this is your ballot. It's not some deep-old machine that, you push the button and now you don't see it anymore. No, you've got it in your hands, you still put it in the box. So
That's the big criticism I've heard about voting machines. Push the buttons and
right, where does it go?
Yeah,
Well,
you have no receipt, so to speak.
Right, and so we would still have it.
Yeah. Okay.
So the machines we have that count now, these just fit right in there?
Yes, ma'am.
Because they're completely different
Yes.
size.
Lori, can you speak to that?
Sure, there's, so on the 850, the input hopper, so when you load that batch of ballots, there's a little arm. So you would scan them separately, the traditional ballots, and you'd rest that arm against the ballots, and then the summary cards, the narrow ones, you would just move that in, flush against them, so it does scan both.
interesting.
To the arm.
Okay.
So Judd is the arm showing.
Yeah, yep, it's right up here. So those are the traditional, so it just moves in and out.
Yeah, it's spills.
Okay.
Bless you.
Bless you, bless you.
Okay, where to from here?
Works.
Jim?
Just a general overview of where we've been. And those of you who know me know I'm kind of like Judd, don't like to spend taxpayer money. And the budget trend shows that. But this year, we have some substantial asks, and the budget is going up because of it. Even though, again, traditionally, since I've been in office, we've gone in a downward trend right there. So the next page, this is not meant to be anything derogatory to other elected officials, but we have kind of been standing down while other departments are growing pretty substantially, and it's time for us to come and face the voting issues and the court issues. When we grow the prosecuting attorney and when we grow the public defender, guess what? We grow the paperwork that's needed to be done, and that's why we need additional people. And again, this is not meant to pick on anyone else. It is just to show where we've been and where we're headed. Maybe it's time to catch up. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Dina for her favorite department. She already told us.
Yes, my favorite department, but I did want to make some comments on the other departments in the division, and we can look at those numbers as well. But county assistants, today, they came forward and reduced a position from full-time to part-time. Part of our overall strategy in the clerk's division to be more efficient and save money where we can and do our jobs better. Recorder also is giving up a full-time position, and we use some of that money in part of our reorg, and you will see that savings precipitate through the preliminary summary once those are finished. Also, the recorder's budget dropped about $100,000. She had an ongoing project to digitize records, and that particular money was rolled forward, but we're not asking for any new money. So she's running her department very efficiently and statutorily was able to raise some fees. So they more than cover their costs and carry their own weight without putting burden on the taxpayers. And then, of course, the indigent fund last year funded their entire operation out of fund balance to the tune of over $700,000. Very concerted collection efforts and high standards for determining indigency have allowed the indigent fund to stay strong and have strong collections and cover those costs. So hats off to them, but these departments aren't really asking for anything. I just wanted to give them a shout out and let you know that we are trying in our division to be as efficient as possible. So now on to my favorite department. So our ask, I will just be completely upfront about our ask. This is a $100,000 ask. We brought this forward last year. We don't have an internal audit function right now. It's a big ask, and I wanted to bring it forward because I think it's something that should stay on your radar. My personal expectation is this one is probably not as high as a priority as other priorities you're facing and of other priorities of the clerk, which we've already gone through. But I did want to bring it to your attention just to keep it on the radar. So we're growing. We don't have a formal internal audit function. What we asked for in the budget was a $100,000 placeholder for a third-party consultant to come in and do a full risk assessment and maybe do some internal audit work for us. We are also looking at internal resources. We do have staff that's trained in this area. So what our hope is that over the next year, we can sit down and figure out what the return on investment would be if we could somehow co-source, partly outsourcing and partly using internal resources. But just wanted to give you a feel for, as we grow, so does our risks. You've read in the paper, you know, there's been frauds, big frauds in our area. So we have good people. We do the best we can with our external auditors to keep an eye on internal controls, but we do have a large organization that's growing. We want to make sure that we know where our assets are. So this slide I pulled from last year's budget hearing, just to give you an idea of our growing reliance on fund balance. So we've had the luxury of having a big fund balance, and last year this takes out solid waste. It also takes out the jail. This just shows proportionately we're relying on fund balance to balance our budget. We've used it for a lot of capital costs and to say for our 5-year plan, for our IT infrastructure, those kinds of things. This just shows a reliance on fund balance. I just wanted to make you aware we're not running out of money yet, but if this trend continues, we could see ourselves in a situation where we're not going to have the kind of reserves and have that kind of luxury anymore.
What do you suppose that is? That we've been running down the fund balance?
Because we're not building it back up. In past years, we underestimated what we would get in non-tax revenues, and that allowed us to build up our fund balance. Now we are very closely monitoring anything that's non-tax revenues to try to reduce the tax burden on taxpayers. So we're just not seeing that money go back into fund balance. We're running razor thin on our revenues.
And I would like to add, when I became clerk, the budget was only looked at on the expense side. People would run a revenue number for the same 200,000, and they'd run it for 10 years. And I said there's two sides to a balance sheet, what you take in and what you spend. And now we have really honed in on revenue, and thus we're not adding like we used to. Every year we'd bring back, here's $1 million for the fund balance, here's $750. It's not happening anymore, or not as much.
So as your finance director, I would be remiss if I didn't kind of talk about some of the things that keep me up at night. These are things that could happen. These are things that as we get bigger and as time goes on, the probability of some of these things could happen. And these are all things that affect our reserves. So some of us were at the IAC meeting last week, and they talked about the shortfall predicted for Medicaid expansion. They didn't really have a good answer for how they were going to pay for that, but they did say that they were talking about pushing down this $22 million shortfall to the counties. We know that they're going to be targeting our county assistance fund. So the luxury that we've had of relying on county assistance to fund a lot of their operations to give us some budget relief when managing our budget deficit. That could potentially go away. They're talking about basing this on population. So we're gonna be right at the front of the line for paying for this Medicaid expansion. We'll know more January 1st. So this one's right around the corner. We're watching this very closely, but this definitely affects us directly.
Even with the 90% federal reimbursement or
We
funding
still have,
rather?
this is the 10%
This is the
that we have to
10%,
come
yeah.
up with, and it's 55, and the state's gonna cover the rest. So this is our piece. So that's one,
You mean 22 million across the 44 counties?
yes,
Yeah, okay,
based on population.
okay.
So, we have a little over 3 million sitting in our county assistance fund. That could evaporate very quickly.
Okay.
So, and we know that the feds usually don't estimate very accurately, so numbers probably higher. So, I put the transit system in here because right now we're building a great transit system and we have federal funding to help pay for that transit system. But once the transit system's built, this is just me putting my accountant hat on. Once the transit system is built and the federal government is looking at funding Medicaid expansion, are they gonna give us funding for ongoing maintenance of this transit system? This is something to think about long-term. How much money are we gonna need to allocate to keep this transit system going?
That's when we talk to the cities.
Right, exactly,
Because
but
the
that's,
only reason we're involved is because of the federal
Right.
money, because they can't get it.
exactly.
Right.
But this puts pressure on us because now we own this thing that we have to maintain.
Right.
So we can hope that our partners will help us, but we will have to definitely lobby them to get them to help us. So that puts pressure on our reserves.
Mhm.
Also, we saw today, our friends at Alliant told us it's all of our benefit costs are going up, so that puts pressure on us as well. Justice services, the conversation continues with justice services. It's just going up, it's a mandated service, we can't help it. Emergencies and disasters, they happen, you plan for them, but you just don't know. Also puts pressure on our reserves. Lawsuits, they happen. ICRIM covers some of that, but we may have to pick up the tab on something. And then just what we mentioned before, because we are trying to budget revenue more closely, we're just not returning fund balance and replenishing those reserves like we used to. So I don't know if in long-range planning, and I pledge to you, I just spent 4 days at a really great conference, and there was a lot of talk about long-term planning and setting aside reserves for things like this. So I will be working in the coming months to put together a more long-range strategy for the county. But it all revolves around cash flow and reserves. So I wanted to just be completely transparent and let you know what's on my mind as far as the county's finances. So with that, we'll say goodbye to our clerk, who's going to.
Thank you, Jim, appreciate it.
Jim. Appointment.
Glad to see you.
Okay.
So questions, discussion?
I had a question,
Sure.
really silly question.
Never silly questions.
Oh, yeah, it is. On that one slide, the guy in jail sitting there, I'm talking about, is that really a rat down to the right?
And you know what's funny is
Is
I didn't realize it was there until Dina pulled it.
Okay.
It's like the poor guy,
I
his
was gonna
only
go.
friend. His only friend.
Down there. Yes, there is.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, I was
Somebody
paying
is
attention, you see?
You know,
Excellent.
you know what's interesting, Dina, in this whole discussion is that when you make the point, which I think is accurate, that we didn't do, or past prior boards necessarily didn't do a good job of forecasting revenue, because I think Jim pointed out they were paying more attention to the expense side.
Right.
So they kind of held the lid on expenses and the revenue was increasing. When you look back and you look at our fund balance and the fact that we were able to fund a jail from fund balance, and then you look at Canyon County and they're looking at 170 million or 180,
Yeah.
and they're under a consent order, no less, and they just turned down the levy, which is really, they're committing suicide down there. you almost look at it and say, wow, we were ingenious up here.
Ingenious.
But not.
I wouldn't go that far.
No, I'm not gonna go that far, because there have been successive years where we taxed at the zero level. So it's fascinating that we taxed at the zero level, but didn't realize that the revenues were going up, how do I put this? Disproportionately faster than the fact that we should have taken some of that, you know, some of the 3%. But now it's almost coming home to roost, it looks like. Am I making sense?
It definitely, yes, it does. It's all about timing. But the flip side of being in high growth, because a lot of these meetings we've been talking about, oh, you know, we're growing, there's more population, there's more demand for services. But we are fortunate, and you know this, Chris, we have very good property values, we have very strong
Well, yes.
tax base on those
Yes.
property owners. We have lake property. Canyon County doesn't have
That's
lake
exactly
property.
right, that's exactly right.
So, I mean, we are growing, but because we're growing and we have the ability to tax, and that tax burden is shared over a larger and larger group of people. So the increment per person or per household is not this huge
That's
amount.
correct, that's
And we're
correct.
in that upswing. Now, how long that lasts, we know
Who
that
knows?
eventually things will go the other direction. We're lucky that because we have these needs, we also have the opportunity to be fair about our levy.
Would you take a hip shot, if you could? Rich Hauser's saying, if I have it correct, about 1.8 billion increase in property valuation. What do you think that would add at the 3% level?
Oh, gosh.
I mean, just a
But I
hip
could
shot.
send, I could send you something. I
Could you?
could put it in my calculator and
Because
send
we're
it to
looking at a
you.
total, we have been looking at a total of
17.
I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's going from over 17 to over
Yeah.
19.
Yeah.
And we've been looking at about 2.7 billion at the 3% level, and I was just curious how much that
Right.
might increase.
Right.
It
And
might be
then-
premature at this point.
Yeah, it would be, but also then take into consideration too, new growth
New growth.
partially gets taken away by urban renewal. So urban renewal skims off, and I have a slide from last year, and I can bring this to the next meeting, showing the property tax bill and showing what the county's piece of it is and what all these other districts do. Just because we collect all the taxes, we only keep a very small portion of that. And I think part of educating the public and helping them to understand what the county's place is in all of this. Really,
Absolutely.
their taxes from the county went down last year,
Mm-hmm.
pretty precipitously.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're in good shape from a public perspective. We're trying to be conservative, we're trying to do the right thing. So I think we should feel good about that.
Okay.
As long as we tell our story.
That's right,
Yeah, that's a good point.
absolutely. All right, so what I have here, and maybe I'll just show mine because
Go ahead.
this is just a very high level of the numbers of the clerk's division. So you can see elections is going to have an increase in revenue, like we talked about, year over year, we're projecting more income to cover that presidential election. So that's 32% more to cover that presidential election, so that helps offset the cost. The state knows
Mhm.
that it costs a lot of money to run a presidential election, so that money is there. Auditor has gone up modestly. That's mainly that $100,000 ask for the internal audit, which is just a recurring theme.
So if we funded it this year or didn't fund it this year and funded it next year, if it's a third party, we could just do it year by year if we had the money.
Yeah,
Okay.
and we can get an estimate too, and I'd like to actually, honestly, I'd like to dig deeper into the ROI of
Yes.
bringing in a third party, because we all know that the clerk can't really audit himself
Right.
without there being that whole perception of independence.
Right.
But I would also say from an internal audit perspective, you have two sides to internal audit. We know that there's a compliance aspect, but we also know that there's a performance aspect. And that's where the ROI comes in, and that's the research I want to do. I want to get some real numbers about what it would save us if we were able to improve processes and take out bottlenecks and save money and save effort and find ways for the county to run more efficiently in these areas.
Okay.
So that, our big ask, the big driver here is that 100,000. If you take that out, it's pretty flat. So elections, let's go over to capital. Here's your costs for elections. These are the asks that Judd talked about. The other big capital ask that's associated with the collections for district court, this is pretty much the biggest part of the ask for capital, is reconfiguring some space to make a payment window and allowing for extra personnel to be there to provide that customer service area.
But you think that can come out of the restricted fund balance source?
We can look into that, but my guess is, and what I'm thinking is that those restricted district court building funds are for those facilities, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's 75, is that what you're thinking?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Dina, could you go back to the previous slide, please?
sure.
Okay, very bottom line, revenue.
Mm-hmm.
So you're projecting over $700,000 shortfall.
What this is, this revenue here, this was the fund balance that was used last year to fund operations.
Okay, yes.
So it's just, it's kind of noise because we haven't plugged in any fund balance.
Right.
So what happened last year is we had revenue projected and we had to cover operations. So instead of, that revenue was actually fund balance. So we haven't allocated any fund balance to cover those costs yet, so that's why it looks like it's dropping. This was the fund balance value that was used
So
last
then,
year.
even without that allocation projected for fiscal '20, if we now go to the next slide,
Mhm.
your overall increase in your budget,
Where are we?
yeah,
Yeah, this
Yeah.
one.
yeah, what's the next one?
Okay. Which one? The capital?
Oh, that's just your capital, I'm sorry.
This is just capital. Yeah, so this is everything by division. So
So your
county assistance does not expect to have any increase in expenses. They're trying to keep their budgets flat.
And is there still, how much is in the fund balance there?
There's
About a little over 3 million.
3.1 million.
3.1 million. So you're expecting 415? No, that's still revenue. So
Mhm.
you're expecting 794 again, essentially. So
Yes.
Yeah.
is that something that we would feel comfortable using that fund balance again for? Or because things are up in the air for Medicaid expansion?
I
What do you
would
think,
let
Sean?
county assistants speak to that, Bert.
It's gonna have to be what you decide, and knowing that it's a mandated program, so you could use that, but then in the event that we would need money to fund us, I mean, it's a mandated program, so that would be, if you want to use it now or possibly later, not knowing how Medicaid expansion is gonna affect us.
Right.
Or if, on the other side, the county has to come up with a difference. It's hard to say right now, as we don't know.
So, okay, I'm trying to,
So the total increase to your budget for the clerk is?
Total increase clerk-wide, so let's see, we've got $3 there. This is $907,275. And that is driven by elections.
yeah, almost 400,000 in elections. Yeah. So, Judd, you've asked for 70 machines. How many would be a happy start?
It would be awesome to have enough machines to really cut down those lines during early voting, especially when we get to next year. So somewhere in the ballpark range of 10 would be a great start. Because it would answer that need. Doesn't do anything on election day, however.
Right.
Which is required, so we, on even years, we have to have this auto mark for ADA compliance. So that's why we're asking for 70, because we have 70 precincts right now.
So they would
So
get rid of these
The idea
80
is like
pounds.
these, my understanding, are these even replaceable? Or
The auto marks?
yeah, the auto marks, they're clunky, but the idea is being, if they had to be repaired or.
Well, we would still maintain
Yeah.
them for you, yeah, as long
Yeah.
as.
How-
It seems to me your greater need is on election day, because that's where your volume is greater. Whereas, you know, in the early voting, you're spreading that out over, what is it, about a 6-week period?
It's, early voting at the elections office is, on these years, are 3 weeks, essentially,
Okay.
2 to 3 weeks.
How old are these?
They were 2006, you said?
Oh, so they're 13 years old.
Yeah, but for county-wise, we're one of the last counties still utilizing this. We have to sometimes ship these, we have the shipping company come and pick them up. They're just hard to bring to the polling location for the poll workers themselves, of how heavy they are.
Right.
And absentee voting typically runs, what, about 30% of the total vote?
It just depends.
It does fluctuate. I mean, we had well over 20,000 in the last presidential cycle. It's
Which
a
would have been
it's a lot
about
of, it's a lot of
30%.
votes.
I see it
processed.
increasing, the trend is that it's increasing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, especially when people move in who've been to states that have the mail-in voting.
Okay. All right, so that's capital. Operating
Yeah,
wise,
so you probably want to mark the machines or make a notation.
I think she did.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Yep. And again, you don't have to make any decisions today.
No.
We're gonna be
Mm-mm.
heading into deliberations, but the note's there and I'll include that. From an operating standpoint, 137 total increase.
Is the 100,000 in there for the internal audit, or that's a different line item?
No, that's a new program.
Okay.
Okay.
And then personnel. So I wanted to mention too, the Odyssey project continues. So right now, we have 4 temporary clerk scanners, but all temporary positions have to be reauthorized each year. So that's why these are here. These are people that are currently working for us that are working on 7 years worth of scanning that needs to be done. We looked at having an outside service do it, but the cost was very prohibitive. And the quality we found, Marissa talked to some folks, and the quality of the scans made the work pretty much useless, that things had to be rescanned because quality wasn't there. So this is an ongoing project, so we would have to have this reauthorized for these 4 people. Temporary election workers, this is a temp, also like a temporary one-time thing, because it's a presidential election, more temps are needed to cover that larger election, so that's a 1-year reauthorization. This position and this position are for district court. You authorized one position to be paid for with salary salvage earlier in the year. These 2 positions would be new to help cover the oceans of paperwork and Odyssey for all the caseloads. We have not increased the number of bodies in district court for so long that they're drowning. So these are 2 new positions to help cover that workload.
So with the 3 new positions, 1 this year and 2 next year, how many years do you think that will last?
Maybe a year or 2 at the most.
So
Those are positions that, they're very difficult positions. It takes months to season those people to learn what they're doing. And they help cover, at the last minute, not only jobs in the civil and criminal departments, but they primarily cover all the judicial secretaries that are for the judge's secretaries, so they can have timeout or vacation or help with the workload. And right now, on a daily basis, we're concerned about covering that. There's times Callie, my manager, has had to go into court to cover. That's how shorthanded we are. And so they're quite burdened, especially with although the benefit of digitization has been helpful somewhat, it's also added to the workload in that each step is now taking longer
Right.
and is not, the program's not that intuitive and custom for district court. So we have to do a lot of workarounds, and we're at the mercy of the Supreme Court to come up with a better way and procedures to be using the software they did give us in order to give us an updated version.
Dina, go back to county assistants, please.
Sure.
What are our expenses running this year? Or what do we, I don't know if you have it handy, what do we average the last few years?
Okay, so here's your 3-year trend for indigent. And there's the average. Indigent administration and indigent ops, that's your 3-year trend for each of the sections, because indigent is made up of both Fund 40 and Fund 10. It's those last 3 lines.
I would note that one as well.
Indigent ops.
Yeah. Well, any one of them, yeah, that's, yeah, indigent ops, yeah.
So this one is actually, yeah, okay.
When does Medicare expansion go into effect? Is it July?
January
January.
1st of 2020.
Of 20, okay.
But they have from now until then to figure out a funding source.
Yeah.
And luckily, I think we have 2 legislators on that committee.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, that was it. Mary, was it Steve McNeil?
No, Addis.
Yeah, Jim
Oh,
Addis.
as, and Mary Susan.
Okay.
Great. And then new programs, of course, internal audit, I'm guessing this one's probably gonna be,
Flag. But bring back numbers. Bring back some real live numbers, like you were talking about, what our ROI would be, and
Yeah, flag.
okay.
And Chris?
Yeah.
Speaking, when you look at that for especially police holds, something we might want to visit the fact that we have a 7-day police hold contract, and we're the only one in the state that does that. And we've been getting, our police holds, we can get a $96,000 7-day now police hold, which is really driving our costs up. And we might go back to looking at the 3 or 4 day that
Good
other
point.
people do a 3-day, and it's something I think that needs to be looked at, and it's an expense that we need to look into. And
Makes sense.
would need to look at that, and that could be such a cost savings of doing that. So I just wanted to
Yeah,
interject
thank
that.
you for that. I
yeah,
appreciate
thank
it.
you. So what is there a statute? Or it's
Yeah,
just
why don't we
whatever
do
agree-
7?
7 have appeared like a month before I became a manager, so I don't know what the background behind doing the
Okay,
7
alright.
was. Most people, as long as they have 2 DE exams within 48 hours, that's how they render whether somebody needs to be going on or released, like to a state hospital. So that's something, other counties are doing it at a 3-day. So I think we need to, and ours used to be a 4-day prior. So I think it's something that's a huge
Consider.
cost
Good
savings
point.
Sure.
that we do need to look at, and as a
Okay.
board, have you look at and renegotiate that contract,
Would
which is a
you-
yearly contract.
Okay, would you bring that to us? Can you
Yes.
do that? Thank you.
Mhm. Is the contract on the calendar year?
Yes, January is when it's due, if we want to negotiate something different.
Do you guys want to wrap it up? We start again in.
Yeah, we got another 1 or 2 minutes.
We do?
Yeah, Casa.
Oh, right.
Yeah, we
Okay.
Casa.
Oh, okay.
3 or?
Okay.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Public comment? We're all part of the public, by the way. Hearing none, 2:20 PM, meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.